Social workers make great lovers. Might seem a strange thing to say. However, I'm a social worker and I should know, and I know lots of other social workers too. And we're powered by love. Our purpose is about love. Now, that might all seem really corny and a bit highfalutin or not even something that's real, but let me give you some examples of when social workers are acting in loving ways. These also can be translated and compared with your own circumstances where you're in loving relationships with all kinds of people in all kinds of situations, from personal relationships to work and out in the community kinds of relationships. Okay, let's see how we compare. So social workers know how to put their own concerns and worries to one side to be truly present for someone whom they're engaged with and talking with, whatever the reason. It is no good being preoccupied with our own feelings and worries if we're trying to be of service to somebody who's in great distress or is trying to think through a problem. So being able to be present by putting our fears and worries and even feelings of inadequacy aside while we're truly present is an important part of being loving. As a social worker, and I think as a human being in all sorts of situations. Okay, social workers are really good at listening, and I would say listening deeply and listening for what is not always said and what is not always obvious, and reading between the lines kind of listening without presuming to know what the person is thinking and feeling, deeply listening to their story as much as possible on their own terms. And this can be challenging in some social work situations where we have to do assessments because there may be risk concerns, for example. But listening deeply, really trying to hear where the person's at, what's important to them. It's usually got a lot of different dimensions to it. It can involve loss and trauma and harm and all sorts of fears and distress. So it's not easy to listen deeply and it takes a lot of practice. So that's the second way that social workers make great lovers. The other way, which is closely related, is that we lead with empathy, and empathy can often be confused with sympathy and pity, but actually it's neither of those things. Classically, people understand empathy as being able to stand in the other person's shoes. I would say it's more like standing beside someone without presuming to know, without judging, and really tuning into and feeling as authentically as you can what those feelings and thoughts might be like for that person. Not what they're like for you, but what they're like for that person or the group of people you're with. So being able to show empathy, lead with empathy instead of judgment is another part of what makes social workers great lovers. The other, and these are all kind of interrelated, but are their own skills as well. To be really good at deep listening and to be really good at empathy, you have to know how to be with someone. This is being present to some extent, and actually a little bit more than being present with your mind and heart. It's obviously those two things, and your whole being, putting everything else aside, and being able to not shy away from the depth of pain and suffering and loss and perhaps outrage and other types of distress that the person may be feeling. And if you've ever sat with someone or been with someone who's extremely distressed, it's almost like you can't breathe because the pain is so acute and so devastating to witness, but to actually be with someone. I certainly remember all sorts of situations in my career, including people who've lost their children at birth or soon after. That kind of devastating loss, it does take your breath away, and it is hard to hold back your own reactions and feelings. But that ability to really be with someone in their pain so they're not alone in their pain is a really important part of being a loving practitioner and a loving human being. Another example of what it is to be a loving social worker is the ability to hold hope when the person no longer feels they can hold hope, when they've lost hope. To have hope and faith, not in a unrealistic way, but just a belief in the human capacity for healing and change and reaching out when all seems lost. So the ability to hold hope, not an easy skill or capacity, because you may yourself be struggling to know what would really make a difference for that person. And because we're lovers, then justice matters. So any situation where there's an unfairness and an injustice happening is a situation where social workers really can shine by standing with the person who's accused or condemned, or who has been wronged, is a victim of crime, and knowing what fair treatment would look like in that situation, and standing with people to enable that. And the other aspect, which is a really big part of social work, is when people are shunned and stigmatised in our society, which is a devastating example of unfair treatment and discrimination. Knowing how to be with and show regard for basic human dignity being upheld when you're with people who feel so made bad and wrong by society is a big part of being a loving social worker. So there we are. There's just some examples of what I think makes social workers great lovers. Hey, thanks. Bye.